Become a master manipulator overnight with these 40 dark tactics. Are you sure you want to know? That's the question I should have asked myself the night I stumbled onto the list. A list buried deep in a thread that had maybe 6 upvotes. A title that felt like clickbait but wasn't. 40 dark tactics to control any room. I didn't go looking for it. I wasn't trying to become some psychological puppeteer. Honestly, I just wanted to stop being powerless. I wanted to stop walking away from conversations thinking, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I see it coming? It started with a breakup, the kind that leaves you hollow and confused because nothing technically went wrong. No yelling, no cheating, no smoking gun, just a slow, quiet unraveling. And the worst part, I didn't even see it happening. One day we were laughing in the kitchen, and the next she looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd been replaced by a less interesting version of myself. That look stayed with me. That look made me question everything. I didn't want to be fooled again. I didn't want to be the last one to know, the one who gets outplayed, outthought, outmaneuvered in the game of human interaction. So I dove into psychology, not the self-help kind, but the raw, messy stuff, the kind that doesn't try to fix people, just explain them. I read about persuasion, influence, power, control, and eventually I found the list. No intro, no explanation, just 40 bullet points, like a psychological spell book, each line sharper than the last. I remember the first one vividly. 1, mirror their body language subtly. People trust those who resemble them. Sounds innocent enough, right? Harmless. But I tried it. First at work, then with friends, and it worked too well. People started opening up faster, trusting me more, saying things like, I don't know why, but I feel like I've known you forever. And I'd just smile and nod, knowing I'd been carefully syncing my posture and gestures to theirs all along. That's when I learned manipulation doesn't feel like evil. It feels like clarity, like watching the pieces move and finally understanding the board. You start noticing things you never did before. The flicker in someone's eye when they lie. The forced laugh when they're trying to cover discomfort. The gap between what they say and how they say it. And the more I read, the more the tactics started blending into my everyday thoughts. 4, pause before answering. Silence creates pressure. 7, ask a question you already know the answer to. Watch how they squirm. 11, repeat their exact words back to them. It creates a false sense of validation. It wasn't about tricking people, not at first. It was about regaining control, about no longer being the person who leaves every interaction overthinking what just happened. I felt awake, like I'd been walking through life half blind, and suddenly someone handed me a pair of psychological night vision goggles. But here's the part no one warns you about. Once you see the strings, it's hard not to pull them. I remember the first time I used a tactic on someone I cared about, my brother. We were arguing about something small, something stupid, and I found myself interrupting with tactic 919. Interrupt emotionally, not logically. Make them question their tone, not their point. I didn't even realize I was doing it until he stopped mid-sentence, looked at me and said, "Why do you always make me feel like the bad guy even when I'm not?" That hit harder than I expected, because he was right. I wasn't trying to resolve the argument. I was trying to win. I had started treating every conversation like a chess match. Every interaction had an angle, a purpose, a strategy. And slowly, something in me started to shift. I stopped trusting people, not because they changed, but because I did. I knew how easy it was to steer someone, how simple it was to earn trust without deserving it, how fragile sincerity could be when met with a well-placed silence or a perfectly timed compliment. People would say things like, "I feel like you really understand me," and I'd nod, smiling on the outside, while a voice inside whispered, "I don't. I just know what you need to hear." And yet, part of me loved it, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being left behind. I wasn't confused by people's behavior. I wasn't playing catch-up in conversations. I was leading them, quietly and visibly, but undeniably. There's a kind of high that comes with that, a power that's hard to walk away from. You start seeing every room like a system to be calibrated, every person like a set of behaviors waiting to be predicted. And if you're not careful, you lose the ability to just be. I remember sitting at dinner with someone I was starting to care about. She was telling a story, laughing, eyes glowing in the kind of way that makes you forget to check your phone, and all I could think was, she just touched her hair twice in 30 seconds. That's a self-soothing behavior. Is she nervous, or am I boring her? That's when I realized I wasn't with her. I was studying her. I wanted to stop. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't, because my brain had been trained, conditioned to analyze, to manipulate, to control. And the worst part, I had done it to myself. I went back to the list that night. Read all 40 tactics again, slower this time, not with curiosity, but with caution, because every one of them worked. Every one of them had gotten me further, but none of them had made me happier. That's the shadow of manipulation no one talks about. It doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see them. You stop seeing people. You start seeing openings, vulnerabilities, leverage. You become effective, but you also become alone. And I was tired of being alone. So I made a decision. I wouldn't unlearn the tactics. I couldn't. They were burned in. But I could choose how I used them. I could set rules, boundaries. I could decide that power without empathy isn't intelligence. It's just cruelty with better grammar. I kept 3 of the tactics, not to manipulate, but to listen better. Number 2, listen for what's not being said. 𝐷 13, watch for micro-expressions. They reveal more than words ever do. Ask, what do you need from me right now? Instead of offering advice. And something shifted again. I started to connect, for real this time. Because I was using what I'd learned not to control the room, but to make people feel safe inside it. The same skills that once made me dangerous started making me dependable. And that's what I want to leave you with. You can learn the 40 tactics. You can use them. They work. But the real mastery, the real edge, it isn't using them to manipulate others. It's learning to master yourself. Because influence without integrity will always collapse under its own weight. Sooner or later, people see through the game. But if you use what you know to build trust instead of breaking it, to create safety instead of fear, to connect, not conquer, then you're not just playing the game, you're changing it. The day I realized I could stop a conversation dead in its tracks with nothing but a pause and a look, I understood how far I'd gone. I wasn't just reading people anymore, I was scripting them. A subtle shift in tone, a dropped eye contact, a carefully placed silence. It wasn't random, it was orchestration, controlled, calculated, and terrifying, because I didn't mean to become this person. I started learning these tactics out of desperation, out of a need to feel safe in rooms where I'd always felt invisible. I didn't want power, I wanted protection, but somewhere along the way, I stopped using them as a shield and started using them as a sword. And people noticed, not all at once, but little by little, the way I always seemed calm, how I never got flustered, how I could say something that sounded kind but somehow left a sting. They didn't have the words for it, but they could feel it, that subtle emotional dissonance, like I was there but not with them, like I cared but not deeply. I was always a few layers away, detached just enough to be safe, too safe. And then came the moment that cracked everything open. It was with someone I loved, or thought I did. She was confronting me softly, bravely, telling me how she felt like I was always managing her instead of loving her, like I wasn't responding to her, but to the version of her I had constructed in my head, one that fit better into my story, one I could predict, control, and respond to with surgical precision. She said, "It's like being loved by someone who's watching a movie of me, not actually seeing me." That shattered me, because she wasn't wrong. I didn't mean to treat people like variables in an equation. I didn't set out to reduce intimacy to psychological frameworks, but the more I learned, the harder it became to unlearn it. When you start understanding the blueprint of behavior, it's hard not to see the scaffolding behind every smile, every sigh, every sentence. You see their wounds before they admit to having them. You see their tells before they know they're playing a game. And it gets heavy. That's the truth most people never talk about when they glorify this kind of awareness. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, you feel 10 steps ahead, but you also carry the weight of knowing more than you want to. You hear the unsaid and feel the disconnection people don't even realize they're projecting. You detect the micro abandonments in conversations, the emotional withholding, the moments people retreat without moving, and suddenly everything feels loud, overstimulating, overcomplicated. Because while everyone else is enjoying the surface, you're seeing the undercurrent, and the undercurrent is rarely simple. It's layered with shame, insecurity, unspoken desires, and you can't not see it. That's where the loneliness comes in. It's not that you don't connect. It's that you connect too deeply to people who aren't aware they're being read, and when they feel exposed, when they feel like they've been seen before they're ready, it doesn't create trust. It creates distance. That's when I realized intelligence without restraint isn't wisdom, it's intrusion. So I started practicing something different, not a tactic, not a tool, just a practice, holding space, not for answers, for uncertainty, letting people speak without me needing to decode it instantly, letting stories unfold without looking for subtext, letting emotions rise without analyzing their origin. And it was uncomfortable, like letting go of the steering wheel and trusting the car to keep moving. But then something beautiful happened. People started to trust me more, not because I understood them better, but because I let them understand themselves, because I gave them room, because I stopped showing up with blueprints and instead brought presence. That's when I started redefining what smart actually meant to me. It wasn't speed, it wasn't prediction, it wasn't being right, it was depth, stillness, awareness with gentleness, and perhaps most importantly, choice. The choice to not use what I knew if it wasn't serving the connection. There were moments where I could dismantle someone's argument, but I didn't. Moments where I could call out the emotional manipulation behind their words, but chose compassion instead. Not to let things slide, not to be passive, but because I realized understanding someone's wound doesn't give you the right to poke it. The more I operated from that place, the more human I felt, the more peace I found. And slowly, the fear that had driven me to learn all these things in the first place started to fade, because I no longer needed to be 10 steps ahead to feel safe. I didn't need to see everyone's motives to feel grounded. I had learned to trust myself, to regulate my own reactions, to navigate complexity without needing to control it. That's a different kind of power, quiet, unimpressive on the surface, but real, sustainable, and deeply felt. I started revisiting the people I had kept at arm's length, apologizing, not just in words, but in energy. I stopped trying to fix them, stopped trying to impress them. I just showed up, unequipped, underdressed, unfiltered, and those became some of the richest conversations of my life, because when you stop trying to manipulate moments, they become honest, raw, messy, yes, but alive. And that's what I had been missing. Not love, not friendship, life, uncontrolled, unscripted, unhacked, just life, showing up in all its weird, tender, unoptimized glory. I still have the list, the 40 dark tactics. Sometimes I look at it not with pride, but with a kind of reverent sadness, because I understand the part of me that clung to it. The scared part, the survival part, but I don't live there anymore. Now, when I walk into a room, I don't try to read it like a map. I feel it. I don't try to dominate conversations. I try to hold them. And when someone tells me something raw, something real, I don't respond with insight. I respond with presence. Because in the end, people don't remember how clever you were. They remember how safe they felt around you, how human, how seen. And sometimes the greatest act of intelligence is choosing not to use it. Choosing instead to love, to listen, to let people be whole, even when they're messy, even when they contradict themselves, even when they're not ready to be decoded. That's the final and perhaps most powerful hack of all, to be fully aware and still choose grace. There's a kind of silence that isn't quiet. It buzzes, it hums, it sits behind your eyes like a pressure you can't name. It's the silence that follows you after you've walked away from a conversation where you didn't say what you meant, where you said the right thing strategically, but not the true thing emotionally. I lived in that kind of silence for years, and I became fluent in the language of it. I knew how to end discussions without resolution. I knew how to pivot away from discomfort with grace. I could dismantle a question with another question, dance around accountability with tact, mirror someone's pain just enough for them to think I understood, while never letting it close enough to actually feel it. But that silence, it always followed me. Because no matter how sharp I got, no matter how impressive I became, there was always this echo inside of me that asked, what would it feel like to be fully present? Not as a version of myself I'd engineered, but as the unguarded, unrefined human I actually am. It scared me, more than failure, more than heartbreak. The idea that someone could see the real me and walk away, not because I was broken, but because I was just ordinary, not optimized, not curated, just me, unfiltered. There was this one night, late, rainy, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. I was sitting on the floor staring at a blank page. I was supposed to be working on a presentation, something to do with behavioral economics and micro-influence techniques, but my hands wouldn't move. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew too much. I knew how to package it, how to make it land, how to lead people to the conclusion I wanted. And in that moment, I felt exhausted by my own ability, because when everything becomes a performance, even truth starts to feel hollow. That's when I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. What am I so afraid will happen if I stop performing? The answers came slow but steady. They'll think I'm boring, they'll think I'm weak, they'll leave. And beneath all that, they'll see the part of me I've spent years trying to hide. That's the paradox, isn't it? We want to be seen so badly, but we're terrified that if we are seen, fully, honestly, people will recoil. So we show them versions, masks, prototypes of our personality shaped by approval and avoidance. But the price of that is everything real. Joy becomes managed. Intimacy becomes negotiated. Vulnerability becomes staged. So I made a choice that night, not a dramatic one. No social media cleanse, no philosophical overhaul, just a quiet promise. One conversation at a time, I'm going to stop managing myself into who I think they want and start showing up as who I am, even if it costs me comfort. And the very first time I tried it, I cried in front of someone. Not a breakdown, not dramatic, just tears, mid-sentence, unexpected. And for the first time, I didn't wipe them away immediately. I didn't apologize. I didn't analyze the moment as it was happening. I just let it happen. And they didn't leave. They didn't look away. They didn't flinch. They leaned in. They listened. And when I was done, they said, "That's the most human thing I've ever seen you do." It was terrifying. and holy, and I've never forgotten it. Because for the first time, I wasn't smart, I wasn't strategic, I was just there, and I was enough. That moment cracked something open in me, and from that crack, things began to grow. Real laughter, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. Real apologies, the kind that aren't calculated for damage control. Real connections, the kind that don't feel like social puzzles to be solved. I started saying things I didn't have perfect words for. I don't know what I feel right now, but I want to figure it out with you. I'm scared, and I don't want to pretend I'm not. This matters to me more than I'm comfortable admitting. And something amazing happened. People didn't lose respect for me. They gave me more of themselves. Because vulnerability is a mirror. What you show becomes a signal for what others can safely reveal. And as I kept showing up that way, I noticed something else shift. The tactics didn't disappear, but they softened. They weren't tools anymore, they were options. I could still read a room, anticipate behavior, analyze tone, but I didn't need to. I wasn't depending on that skill to protect me from intimacy. I was allowing it to enhance my presence, not replace it. There's a big difference between using intelligence to connect and using it to control. I started choosing connection. I'd rather be confused with someone than be correct alone. I'd rather feel deeply and be hurt than skim life safely. I'd rather risk being misunderstood than filter myself into invisibility. It wasn't easy. Every day still has moments where I feel the pull, the temptation to retreat into analysis, to play the role I've mastered. But now I can hear that voice and not obey it. I can feel the old reflex and still choose something new. I remember walking into a difficult conversation recently, one that would have once sent me into mental war room mode, predicting outcomes, scripting responses, preparing counter moves. Instead, I said this: I don't have all the answers, but I care enough to sit in the mess with you. That conversation changed everything, not because I said the right things, but because I stopped trying to win. And when I look at my life now, my real life, not the polished version, I see something I never expected. Peace, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of wholeness, of not needing to split myself into palatable parts, of being able to show up to every interaction knowing I might be misunderstood, but I won't be misrepresented because I'm not performing anymore. That's what being 50% smarter has come to mean for me. Not faster thinking, not more leverage, but deeper awareness. The ability to notice my impulses and choose alignment instead. The capacity to see through someone's behavior and still respond to their humanity. The strength to sit in uncertainty and not rush to define it. That's the real edge, because anyone can learn tactics, anyone can mimic power, but becoming someone who chooses honesty when deception would be easier, that's rare. And if you're someone who's chasing this path, let me offer you this: you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not weak for wanting more than influence. You are wise. The discomfort you feel isn't a flaw. It's a signal that your heart is still intact, that your mind hasn't dulled your soul, that you still crave something real. So follow that, trust it, because there is strength in softness, there is power in pausing, and there is brilliance in being the kind of person who can walk into a room full of strategies and still choose sincerity. That's the kind of person I'm becoming, not the smartest in the room, but maybe, just maybe, the most real.